I mean, I'll go through a blizzard like yesterday to go vote.
When President Trump's team said they needed help in Iowa due to the blizzard, only one Indiana congressional campaign stepped up.
It's getting a little squirrely.
Endorsing President Trump because it looks good in a press release, well, that's one thing. But showing up when President Trump asks for your help, that is something completely different.
My name's Charles Bookwalter. I'm a former Green Beret, and I'm a candidate for Congress in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. We drove over here during this bad weather and this blizzard to help out, right? And we're here to help out because it seems like in Iowa, like in Indiana, that this is a race for second place, that our leader has already been chosen. This is the man that is going to help fight against the most pressing issue we have, which is the managerial class and holding them accountable. These issues, these crises that we face right now, the border, energy, inflation, forever wars, this is brought on by a managerial class that is failing us, and they tell us that we need to just go home. They got it all under control. Everything's taken care of as they give away our country. And frankly, it's a disgrace, and everyone in here should be offended. And we have some good candidates out there, but the fact is that this is the man that's going to lead us. This is the man that's going to unite us, and this is the man that we all need to get. You want to see Republicans unite and come together? Then this is how we do it. The Department of Justice, another part of the managerial class, has been weaponized against this man. And so by defending Donald J. Trump, we're saving our own skin. Does anyone else feel that way? Does anyone else feel that way? By protecting this man, we're protecting our own skin. But right now, we need to rally behind this man, and we need to take our country back. And the last thing I'll say is what Green Berets do all over the country. We recruit, train, and fight alongside our allies in other parts of the world. That's what you need to do. You need to get involved. You need to get engaged. You need to run for precinct committeeman. You need to run for delegate. And you need to take our country back.
To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and the Bookwalter for Congress campaign, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Welcome to the show. My name is Kramer, and next to me is Charles Bookwalter, the man of the hour. We went over to Iowa over the weekend, had a great time. It was a little bit of an adventure heading into a blizzard with 20 below zero weather. We get to Peoria, and what happens? The heat in the truck goes out. It was a fun time. Cold, cold, cold. Charles, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Can you hear me okay now? We'll have to get a test from the audience at whether I can be heard. I hope I can be heard now.
I hope you can. I hope you can.
Well, that trip did. Okay, that trip did give us a great amount of content and a lot of stories to talk about because of all the issues that we faced, the fact that we just picked up and went over there. And we didn't do much planning before this. While we were there, we decided that we figured that this would be the content of our Thursday night town hall. So we'll talk about that tonight. But it was for good reason because I just got home. It was a little after 5 o'clock that we got home because yesterday we went down to the Ark Encounter in Kentucky and saw a show there that they're doing, a C.S. Lewis show, which was a great show to go see. I encourage anyone to see it. The girls enjoyed it very much, and it was good. It was even enjoyable for adults. So we went to the Ark Encounter, explored that, and then spent the night down there in rural Kentucky, a beautiful, at a working farm. It was very pretty with a beautiful sunrise. It was a great experience in God's country. And then we went to the Creation Museum today, got there early and spent our day there. So great experience. If anyone that hasn't gone and seen that, it was a great time. And it allowed me I didn't worry about my virtual town hall meeting because I knew what we were going to talk about. And I didn't have to prepare too much for this. If we have any questions about answers or in Genesis or whatever down there, I'm happy to take those on the virtual town hall. One thing I tell people, because I always encourage people to test security. It is a thing that special operations do. They get paid this big dollars, and a lot of times people retire from Delta Force and SEALs and stuff, and then they test corporate security. I oftentimes test security, and I get by. 8 times out of 10, I get by. Maybe even 9 times out of 10. I did not get by through. I got by through the Ark Encounter. I did not get by through the Creation Museum. They were pretty strict about their security. Yeah, and their machines worked, and they were strict enough that I just finally asked them, "What are you looking for?" And they said firearms, and I'm like, "Well, it's not in my bag; it's on me." And they're like, "Okay, sir, can you just go take it out to your car and leave it there?" So, it's a shame, but I can see why the Creation Museum has tight security. But I still encourage people to test security. All you have to do is go take your firearm out in your vehicle and lock it up. There's no reason that you can't test it. They ask you to take it out. You just take it out and go put it in your vehicle. So, so we went to the Iowa straw poll, and we learned a lot there, Kramer. I know I learned a lot there. Some things were reinforced there. We did talk to a lot of people that were caucusing and got some feedback about why we're there and how many times they caucused, whether they were regular caucus goers or if it was their first time. But, I think first off, what I want to say is that, this is just another. So I've said this before on the town hall, that as a friend in the campaign and we say this a lot. You say, we just keep showing up. I mean, we pray, we ask for guidance, and I just show up. And sometimes I'm underprepared. I don't know. I just pray for the words and the strength. And Kramer, we didn't have a solid plan going over to Iowa.
It was not a solid plan. Well, what we knew is we knew that they needed help. So we knew that we'd be able to land somewhere, and someone would be able to use us. The benefit that you had with your team is that they were calling ahead and making arrangements and finding some stuff for us to do when we got there. What ended up happening that I thought was most interesting is that even though the trials and tribulations we went through of the cold and the car not starting and yada, 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 Charles, what we kept finding is that opportunity kept falling in our lap time and time again, simply because we asked, what can we do to help?
That's right. Yep. Yeah, you just show up, and then you don't just show up and sit there. You actually start doing. So there wasn't a lot because of the cancellations. There were multiple events that were canceled. I think Trump was supposed to be in Davenport or have something. They were canceled. We didn't realize this until the drive over. But again, we were calling people on our team saying, hey, can you call ahead and ask them and figure out? We got some numbers of who to follow up with. But a lot of things were canceled. And Kramer, we were driving over there, and I was talking to people on the campaign team and my wife saying, it's really not that bad. It's disappointing these things were canceled. And then we got, right on the west side of Illinois and into Iowa, and right outside Iowa, there was a stretch that there were 6 or 8 semi trucks in the ditches, cars in the ditches. The drifting was really high. The wind was very strong the entire time. But that's when we realized, okay, this is why they've canceled the events. It was 15 below. The wind was blowing very hard. It was very cold. It was cold to just step outside,
Charles, I think what was interesting is that Iowa taught 2 Indiana boys what cold really is.
Yeah, it was cold. It was cold down to your bones. And so that means that there weren't a lot of people out. Even when we went to lunch a few times, we ran into very few people. But that didn't stop. You just keep looking for opportunities. And we looked for opportunities. We called people. So the next morning, the first thing we did was we went and joined David Pouch, who's running in Iowa's. I'm sorry, what?
It's Potts, isn't it?
Pouch.
Is it Pouch? Okay, I was calling it Potts. He never corrected me.
Like a kangaroo pouch.
Okay.
That's how he said it to me the first time I asked him. So David Pouch and we went to a gun show there, and there was enough people there that was worth the time. In Iowa, to run for Congress, you have to get 1,700 signatures. You have to get 45 from each county, and David is in 20 counties, and then you have to get a total of 1,700 total signatures. That's something that we don't do in Indiana. That I did not know that they did that in Iowa, but they did. So that's an extra step that David had to do. But we interviewed David. If you want to look at it and watch the interview, it's about a 10-minute interview. We just talked to David about why he's running and some of the things that he's hearing and some of the differences between himself and the incumbent he's challenging in the primary, another Republican in the primary. And you can go to the Facebook page and you can watch that interview. So that filled up our time during the day there. I think then we went and warmed up for a little while.
Well, that was the issue. Yeah, Well, the issue is that in addition to everything that was going on, the truck had stopped working. It was so cold that the diesel truck needed to have its glow plug actually plugged in, and the trouble that we went through that. Like I said, there was a lot of trouble. What we kept doing, though, is going back time and time and time again and finding, okay, we can't do this. Can we Uber to this? Can we Uber to that? So that evening we go see Ramaswamy. His last stop as a presidential candidate in 2024.
That's right. That's a good point. I didn't think about it like that, but that was Vivek's last rally because the next day he suspended his campaign. But no, you're absolutely right. It would have been so much easier to stay in our comfortable homes that day on Saturday and not drive over, just like it would have been very comfortable for us to stay at the hotel. It was so cold and not make it to that Vivek event, but we did. We packed everything up and jumped in an Uber and headed up there, and I'm glad we did. It was a great event. I've made it very clear. I think Vivek Ramaswamy's ideas, I mean, how can you not? If you look at my tweets or my Facebook page or listen to me at town halls, the things I say are the things that the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign is saying, which are the things that the Trump campaign is saying. So it's pretty obvious why Vivek didn't do as well in the Iowa straw poll because his votes went to Trump. And most people that had Vivek, that were there for Vivek, they had the Save Trump, Vote Vivek shirts on. So yeah, they were. And I talked to a couple that were at the Iowa straw poll that told me they voted for Vivek, but they were big Trump supporters. They just liked Vivek for whatever reason. The new blood, I think the new blood argument, that argument can go both ways. But so that was a great and fun experience.
Here's what I think is interesting is that it allows them to say that they're pro-Trump agenda without saying they're pro-Trump. I think there's a lot of anti-Trumpers that want what Trump delivered. They just don't want Trump. Would you agree?
Yeah. And it was what that woman that stumped for Nikki Haley said. They just are saying that it's a divisiveness and they want to just get, and here's the problem. And this is what this woman said for Nikki Haley. And it is a red flag for me, and bells and whistles go off when they say, we don't want to relive the past.
Right.
We don't want a divisive figure. And I'm like, whoa, no, that is not how this works. Accountability is absolutely what you have to have in a system like this. You absolutely have to have accountability. And most of the time, the only people that I've heard say that they want to just get past it and don't want to think about COVID anymore are Democrats or leftists. And so when that person stumping for Nikki Haley said that, she was full of what are they called? Dichotomies, I guess, like saying one thing but acting another way. And
well, it was an interesting room overall, and it's when you're speaking, you don't get the opportunity to really gauge what the room is because you're talking, and you were up caucusing for Trump. We played that at the beginning. Great speech, by the way. But what I think is interesting is that I got to watch the room, and then I got to watch the video. And look at the faces of the people as they're watching this watching you give the speech. And Charles, half the room was not engaged in Republican ideology. When you said we're going to close the border, we're going to bring down inflation, we're going to do all of these things, Republican ideas, we're going to limit government, they were sitting there with their arms like this, not clapping. Yeah. While half of the room was clapping. Here's what I found interesting. The numbers were half and half. Nikki Haley won that room. 51 to 44, which, and by the way, no votes for DeSantis in a Republican room. So the votes
there were 25 votes for DeSantis.
Oh, there were? I didn't know that. I take that back then. Okay,
I
take that
back. Still, half the votes for DeSantis, 25.
Right. And
Vivek got 8, and Chris Christie got 1. And by the way, people, we'll talk more about this caucus because I think it's interesting. But the reason I know that is because I was a speaker there, and the speakers get to sit at the table and count and verify and watch the count in an Iowa straw poll. There's a lot of little things that were interesting to be a part of in this process. But they invited me to watch the process of the counting because I spoke for Trump. But I want to talk about that too, Kramer. 2 points about that. One, speaking for Trump happened hours before the event. Again, we were looking for opportunities, so we talked to David Pouch about going to this place and stumping it and being able to talk, but it was not confirmed yet. And so we ended up calling a representative for the Trump team who wasn't sure there was a spot, and then but anyway, I worked my way up until I finally found the decision maker who was out of Des Moines.
Right.
And within 30 minutes called me back and said, yep, we need you at this precinct and there. So I went and got, my official Trump captain hat. And I mean, it's like it has to be a captain hat.
Look how tall it is.
Because only captain hats sit this high on your head. It reminds me of my recently late uncle who just passed away not long ago, but Uncle Bob was a Marine, and he always wore his hat like a Marine. This has to be level to the floor, and he always wore it real high like that. So it's a nice high Trump caucus captain hat.
Now, I want to add in that there were 2 of those hats. We were given 2 of those hats, and I didn't get one. Charles took both of them. And I said, I'll go ahead and take it. You spoke. I didn't speak. You've got the memory. I was just the camera guy. Go ahead and take it. I agree 100%. Charles, let's talk about the thing. You started to hit on it. When we talk about election security, election integrity, and so on, I think it was interesting that as a speaker, you got to watch the vote count happen in real time. Anybody could stand around, but we all got to know within 5-10 minutes of the vote, of the election of Trump as it wasn't Trump in that room, but the caucus chose and had all of the work done in about 10 minutes, counted and everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And everybody in the room got to agree that that's what happened in that room. That's democracy in action. That's when your vote really counts because you can see it counting. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And no doubt about it. And I want to make that point. But before we move to that, I don't want to skip about what you said about. So take a note of that, Kramer. Make sure we get back to this. Democracy in action. It's a great point, and I want to talk about that. But you brought up looking among the room and seeing that a lot of these people didn't agree. Well, we knew by following the Iowa caucus, going up there, and it was already been written about on Twitter and in Zero Hedge, that the plan was like similar to Operation Chaos against Obama when they came out and voted for Hillary to bring her into the primary. A similar plan was hatched in Iowa to come out for Nikki Haley because Democrats and never Trumpers wanted to get Nikki Haley to win the Iowa straw poll. So there was rumors that a lot of Democrats were going to attend the Iowa straw poll. Well, you got the advantage better than I did by kind of looking at the room and gauging the speech. I saw as soon as I walked in, I sat at a table and I just started talking to people and interviewing them. And you could tell clearly I had 2 Trump supporters, and we agreed on many of the issues. And their issues were borders, inflation, COVID, and COVID shots, and accountability. And the entire time, and again, you only get these things through like spiritual gifts, like discernment, I think is one, but also through going through some of the training I've gone through, watching people, watching their reactions. And this gentleman sitting directly to my right, at first he had an earpiece in and he was listening to something. But then when I sat down and I started talking to these 2, he stood and his hands folded and back, not interested in the conversation all the entire time. Almost looked condescending, and I don't want to judge a book by its cover. But again, I'm looking at everything. I'm watching and taking notes. And then after the conversation, he became interested. He took his earphone out. And then I started asking the 2 ladies about the caucus, and they were showing me their ballot and how they vote and all the things. I was asking how many times they'd done it. And the gentleman commented that this was actually a lot tamer than the Democratic caucus.
Really?
And I heard that and I just tucked it away. And I thought, okay, I'm going to come back to that question because I don't want to immediately jump on it and so I asked him a few more questions. And then I asked something else about a Democrat. I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Or whatever it was, a follow-up to the Democrat. And he gave an answer. And I said, and then we talked a little bit more amongst ourselves. And then I looked at him and I asked him the question I'd already asked those two. Is this your first Republican caucus? And what do you think his answer was?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He was a Democrat that was there. He had no interest in talking to anybody. But when you go to those things, you're talking about politics. You're there
Exactly.
for a reason. Like, yeah, you're engaged with your neighbor. Where do you guys live? Oh, because it was all precinct 61. He wanted nothing to do with anybody in that room. And he admitted to going to Democrat caucuses, and this was his first Republican caucus. And so, bing, I'm like, oh, that right there is someone that is taking advantage of open primaries.
Yep.
I want to make a point of this because I said this so many times to all these Indiana political pundits when they would look down their nose at me like I didn't know what I was talking about when I was challenging the 2 primary rule. They'd say, we can't do the 2 primary rule. Democrats can just come over to our primary and they can run as Republicans and run for office. I said, you don't care about that because if you did, you'd close our primaries.
Right.
You don't have to make more laws and you don't have to stop someone from running for office for 4 years. All you have to do is close the primary, make people register. You could move registration 3 months out or 6 months out or something like that. Yeah, and they have to, and then you can follow it by people, and they're registering for the party, and they can only draw the ballot of the party that they're registered for. So they have to go on record of saying, I'm a Republican, I register as a Republican, and I'm drawing these people were not. They were going in there as Democrats, getting a paper ballot, and they were stuffing it. And that was obvious that was happening. So Iowa probably needs to look at closing their primaries,
well,
just
not probably,
like
they definitely need to do it because we saw that half the room was full of Democrats. Half.
Very possible.
Half.
I mean,
yeah. You know, why aren't Democrats playing by the same rules? Well, because we play fair, or we try to at least, right? And we see Democrats time and time again taking the low road as they project at us, and they tell us that we're the ones that are causing the problems. And that's why we've got to fight back. You've got to join in. I'm tired of people telling me that their vote doesn't count. Well, if you don't show up and vote, it definitely does not count.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, that's not the answer, and that's not going to change anything. Oh, and that's what I believe, was it Vivek that night of the town hall? Or I'm wondering if it was something I listened to, but I think it was Vivek that said, when they said, well, how can, remember, Kramer, it was a question that someone asked in the back, and they said something about election integrity, and they're very concerned with the upcoming election, and that they think that these voter rolls are getting stuffed. And then there's election fraud happening. And how do we trust these votes? And how do we do something about it?
Yep.
And he said, you've got to get out and support, and we have to have overwhelming numbers on our side, is what he was saying.
Yep.
For them to have to overcome this fraudulence in a way that's so obvious. And so he said that, and then the next day, that woman, that Nikki Haley, said something about unity, and she didn't think that Trump was the man of unity. And that's when I got up and I said, no way, this is the man of unity. And that kind of putting those two pictures together, and this is what we have to show.
Right.
And we have to show them that we're unified, and everyone has to get behind Donald Trump, to make sure our numbers are like 80-20.
Right.
And the silent majority has to come out and vote. You have to run for office. You have to run for precinct committeeman. You have to run for state delegate. And if you have any questions about how to do that, I'm asking you right now, if you've ever thought about it in your life, about getting involved, now is the time. Right. And please contact my campaign, and I can put you in touch with the right person, the right people, and what this position is and how to get involved in something that doesn't take a lot of your time.
Well, let's get down to the purpose. Let's get into the purpose of what the live town halls, what we're doing this for. It's a virtual town hall, it's a digital town hall, whatever you want to call it. And it allows you, those in the 4th District, or even people across the country that like what Charles is having to say, to jump into the conversation. So jump into the comments, join the conversation, and let us know what you have to hear or have to say. Ask Charles a question, especially if you're from the 4th District. Want to hear from you, Indiana's 4th District. We'll be right back after this. And by the way, this is why Charles is running, because this is what we're up against.
You get out and you create a crowd.
Get up in the face of some Congress people.
We kick.
The domestic enemies are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with their allies in the Congress.
I think Democrats are ignoring this problem.
The NYPD is reporting 28 shootings from just over the weekend. That's a 600% increase.
We're seeing the same thing here in Los Angeles. Our homicides have been up 32%.
I applaud Eric Garcetti for doing what he's done.
We've got 4 blocks in Seattle that you just saw pictures of that is more like a block party.
We had 2 murders, multiple shootings, rape, robbery, assault.
We need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
We need a revolution in order to overthrow this system, bring a whole new communist world into being.
Fundamentally transform the country.
We ain't about to wait until the next election. We about to go get that motherfucker.
Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back. And we're back. We're with the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall, and we're taking your questions on Facebook, Twitter, and so on. If you got a question for Charles, let him know, and we'll get you up and get your question answered. The interesting thing about what happened post-caucus was most interesting to me, and I think is what happened when Trump won in such an overwhelming manner. First thing the Democrats tried to do is play it down. But secondly, MSNBC and Rachel Maddow, they decided to go ahead and censor the speech, the Trump's victory speech. Charles, is this healthy for our nation?
No, I mean, didn't they call the media the 4th branch of government? I mean, isn't that what at a time when I guess it was more likely or more possible that the media or that media and news outlets were actually reporting truths? I don't know, but there's a lot of censorship that's going on now. I think it's one of the fronts that we are facing right now is,
let's take a look. Let me take a look real quick here. Let's take a look at what Rachel Maddow had to say, and please feel free to stop me, and we'll discuss what she has to say here. But I think it's interesting that in her piece she said that they could not show Trump and his speech because they, as a broadcast facility, could not broadcast falsehoods. It's ludicrous.
The projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will keep an eye on that as it happens. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech, if there's anything noteworthy, something substantive and important. The reason I'm saying this is...
There you go.
So for everyone, we were at the Iowa caucus started at 7:30. We got into our precinct room, and by it was supposed to start at 7. By 7:30, they had realized that our room was too small. We had over 100 people, and the room was set for maybe 25, so they had to move. And so we started maybe 7:30. We were maybe done at 8:30, Kramer. And Kramer had before ours was settled. Trump had already been announced that he had won the Iowa caucus. So we were counting our ballots, I believe, if I'm right. It was right around that time, right at the end of it. Yeah. So 8:30 was when it had already been projected.
Yep. Here we go.
Of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish. It is a decision that we regularly revisit.
This is what I found interesting. they go back from time to time, and are we going to still let Trump not speak? Are we going to still silence Trump? They go back and do it on a regular basis.
And honestly, earnestly, it is not an easy decision, but there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things.
Yeah. Did you hear that?
Hey, do you know how they say they say that they're not after Trump, they're after us? You know how people say that? They're going through him to get to us. Well, I can't see that any other way. Like that right there is because she said can't provide a platform for him to give the unbridled live speaking. Right. So what she's saying is you people are so dumb or are so lost. And here's why. You don't think that I can listen to someone speak live and determine whether that is someone that I want to support? They are live speaking. There's no editing being done. If that is in reality that person speaking live, that's what we should encourage, because it can encourage people to say the wrong thing or whatever. I mean, Trump has gotten out and done impromptu speeches for like 40 minutes. Right. Like that is absolutely what we should be encouraging.
Yeah, I want to hear him speak live. I don't need an interpretation from MSNBC.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, so many of the biblical of the studies over the Bible and everything was always about interpretation. And that's what Martin Luther and some of these other people have said over the years is stop relying on someone else's interpretation and read it for yourself. It's not that hard to understand. That is like her saying, it's you that we're after, because when you all hear what this man is saying live, you're going to agree with it and you're going to follow it. Right. And we can't allow that to propagate. So we're going to censor.
We can't allow you to make up your mind on your own. We're going to make up your mind for you, and we'll tell you what you should hear. And what we hear is they take clips like they did the day that he came down the escalator. We know how they do this, right? He came down the escalator. We heard what he said about Mexicans, and what did they tell us? Just the opposite. They lied to us going into an election. That is election interference. They pick a piece that they want to play over and over and over again. And how many Democrats have you heard, Charles, tell you that Trump said that Mexicans are rapists and thieves and they shouldn't be here? That's not what he said. But that's what's ingrained in their brain because of that played over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
And not just as many Democrats had said it, but that's just one example. That's just one example of something that was said that they misinterpret and they blast out as misinformation, yet they're telling us that we're the propagators or purveyors of false narratives and misinterpretation. It's projecting. It's something that I've always said that Democrats do better than anybody is they project their terrible ideas out because they're thinking it and they know they're capable of it. They blame everyone else for thinking that way. These are examples of it.
Let's talk about misinformation and disinformation. And we've got a whole series that we're doing tonight. So don't go anywhere because it's a great show. We're going to get into the WEF and how their tentacles are getting into the heartland of Indiana and the plans that they're doing. But what Rachel Maddow did is a perfect example of what the WEF wants control of. For you, they want to silence you from being able to say anything, but they want to be able to tell you anything that they want. We're going to get to that in a minute. In the meantime, Charles, there's been a lot of confusion about what's actually going on in the Red Sea. We've got a question here from Sean Christy Vaughn, and the question is, what do you think of the situation with the Houthis will bring for America?
I think the situation with the Houthis is that they are backed by Iran, and that's a dangerous situation for America as we fight these proxy wars in other parts of the country. So I know it's very nuanced. I know that we have to keep trade open, that we can't allow attacks to occur on merchant vehicles and commercial transportation. But until we assess the situation and the etymology of the situation, the origins or the genesis of the situation, then we're going to find ourselves in a major conflict for 25 years with major superpowers across the world. And I think that's should be a great concern to everyone. not just in the United States, but in the world. And I think we've got to find better ways to figure out these issues diplomatically instead of always falling on conflict. And remember, if we have these things in the areas, they're going to get attacked.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about merchant ships. I'm talking about when we have men deployed in other parts of the world in dangerous areas. We celebrate them from that. And some people hero worship them, like they defended our country. Well, so don't be surprised sometimes when they get attacked in other parts of the world. That's that presence. That's going to happen.
Well,
so you can't act like you're going to just level the rest of the world because 3 soldiers got killed overseas when that's what our job is, to be over there and to be doing this. So you can't have it both ways. You can't hero worship for putting your life on the line and then you're not appropriately and with great respect respect them for doing that. And I doubt that people that die in conflict want the kind of retribution that ends in world conflicts that kill hundreds of millions of people. For goodness sakes, I'm sure they probably, if they could reflect, would say, I will sacrifice my life to save 300 million people. You guys just become friends. I know it's not what people want to hear, but in reality, when you talk to combat veterans, because I am one, and I talk to them, most of them feel this exact same way. They're the ones that carry the weapons, the burdens, the sacks, the weight, and everything that comes with it.
Well, it's real easy, Charles. It's real easy to say, hey, let's go to war. Let's go fight a fight, right? That's real easy. But Mike Tyson put it best. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Right?
No doubt about it.
And so I don't know what combat's like. You do. So I'm going to take your word and go, listen, I don't want that. If Charles says that he's been there and it's bad, it's like going to a bad restaurant and you're telling your friends you don't ever want to go there. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. That's why, when there's a lot of talk about Civil War. Remember, I think that was something that was brought up in the Iowa. Maybe you brought it up, Kramer. Some of the most highly searched terms,
right?
A revolution and Civil War and things like that. And that's very dangerous. And it can be very bad for a number of people. And that's not anything anyone should want. And that's why war is so brutal. And that's why I am a strong advocate, like our founding fathers, of a strong defense. Because you can justify and you'll fight till the death to defend, to actually defend things that you love, your family, your home, your country. But when you go and do that overseas and then realize, I'm not really sure that's what we're doing, is fighting to defend our homeland, then you start to question it. And so that's why, I'm a strong advocate for a strong defense, and that needs to be our focus.
Well, speaking of strong defense, we got another question here from Hoosier Framer. What is your position on the border standoff happening between the government and the state of Texas?
I think that anytime. So first of all, my overall position for the border has always been that the federal government is not doing those border states any favors by trying to determine how this works from a federal standpoint. This has been an issue my entire lifetime, and it remains an issue my entire lifetime. The walls go up and they go down, and contractors get wealthy, and the border never ceases. So I've always said that this money should be, and more autonomy should be given to these border countries like Arizona. More autonomy should be given to the governors of these states, and the money should be given from the federal government to the states and allow them to better handle the issue. And this is a great example of that, because Texas is deciding this is the best way for them to handle their issue. And so they've taken the responsibility and the control with their National Guard. Now, it's still the National Guard, so it's government. But anytime that I see states practicing and putting into practice federalism or nullification, then I'm a strong advocate of that. And you've got to support states that are standing up for their inherent states' rights and federalism for important issues. And border security is a huge issue in Texas, and it's not being solved, no matter if it's Democrat or Republican that's in Texas, no matter what the polls say or referendums or anything they do. And it's because of the oversight of the federal government. And if anyone thinks that we haven't given them tons of money, I can't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but the amount of money we put into border security, homeland security, the IMS, immigration services, and all that is mind-boggling. And we've created all this infrastructure around this, these agencies and bureaucrats and all this stuff, and it's never gotten better, and it's only gotten worse. So the common denominator is when the federal government is doing this heavily, or they're too big and they're too broad and they can't control it, more responsibility has to be given to these other executives and smaller entities that are closer to the ground, that are on the ground, seeing how they can do this and implementing strategies that work, like that proposed by former Congressman Steve King, who I had the pleasure of meeting at the VEC event. So to answer that question, one, I think the states should flex their muscles more often. It doesn't happen enough. And that was a key component of our government setup. And number two, I think that the federal government should already be giving off those responsibilities and autonomy to the governors and legislators of the state.
We've got another question here concerning the border. It's coming from Instagram. Illegals are permeating the Midwest with identification provided by blue cities. How do we unravel that?
You need tighter border security. How do you unravel it? I mean, it's out of control, you guys. It is out of control. There are people coming into the country. We have to have manifests on airplanes and buses to go anywhere. And immigrants are coming over and they're getting shipped all over the country, literally in planes and buses with no identification, no history, no background, nothing. This is a huge security issue. Okay. And that's why, since the beginning of my campaign back in May 21, I've been talking about this, about bringing our troops back home. We have 800 bases in 180 countries with the largest military in the world. We have men off fighting battles that they shouldn't be. And as a result, we've given up the fight here at home to protect our own culture and our own way of life. And it is being robbed of us. There's no other way of saying that. And so we need our men back home in our communities, in our churches, in building businesses and doing that, and not being paid soldiers all over the world. And then they need to be deployed when necessary to our borders to secure it. And how it seems like, actually, I'm not going to answer this. I'm not going to answer the answer. I'm going to answer it with a question. This second part is,
okay.
I get that question asked me, like, what can we do to unravel it? And immediately my head starts to go like, okay, it's already being managed by a government agency.
Right.
Okay. So we know that agency is failing in its responsibilities to control the border and then to document people that are here, to protect its citizens. They are failing.
Yep.
Even though they are getting an exorbitant amount of money. They're failing those responsibilities that we have given up to them.
And I don't think they're failing. I don't think they're failing. It's by design. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But it's by design. There's we've got laws in the books, Charles. We don't need any more laws. We don't need any more money. We just need to enforce the laws that are on the books and remain in Mexico. That's the biggest thing. I've got a question here from Cliff Brown on Instagram. It says, we're already in a civil war, but it's high tech, brainwashing children in schools, controlling the vote count, and driving inflation so high, everyone has to rely on government assistance. What's your thought?
It's what I was explaining. When we are focused on world affairs and we have our military everywhere, we're not here defending our own culture and our own community. The same thing happened in Vietnam War, if you kind of think about it, that we from the 50s and then the 60s being a war in Korea and then the Vietnam, and we lost focus with our own culture and our own responsibilities in our communities. And what we had, those cultural revolution. We had the cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s that was probably could be argued that it was because, men of fighting age lost focus on their own communities and their own families and schools and all the things that we should be, our businesses and all that. And we've lost focus on this community, and we're focused on globalism, so I would answer it the same way. I think and now we're doing it again. We've done it with GWOT, the global war on terror. We've lost focus of actually defending and representing and loving and providing for our fellow countrymen and the United States. And we've lost focus on that. And we need to refocus on making America a great country, a great constitutional republic. That's what made us great, and that's what we need to focus on.
Got a question here from Pete Carlino off of Facebook. Does the recent mass illegal immigration, a large percentage of which are younger men, present a security risk and potential crime risk when the economy weakens and jobs disappear? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, of course it does. And again, think about who we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. And I can't believe this. All these questions keep funneling back to some of the same responses. But these men are leaving these war-torn places. These are a lot of these men and families, a lot of men are war refugees. They are escaping the Middle East and Africa from decades of war. And so, again, think about that when we talk about supporting or creating conflicts in other parts of the world. And so, yes, they're a threat. They can be potentially, but there's a lot of good people that come to the United States, and we're supposed to have an agency that kind of determines that through looking through a background and doing some investigation and figuring out, isn't that why the process takes so long for people to come over? Is this thorough investigation? Well, that's not happening, and you have a lot of war refugees. I don't know what the percentage of them is, but if you look at they first started fleeing to the Nordic countries and the Netherlands and all over those areas, and a lot has changed in those areas. There's a lot higher crime that's occurring in those, because if you're in a war torn area, then you're probably going to be more prone to violence and have seen things in your life that lead you to do certain things. So war is brutal, and war is a racket, and it damages young men. And this is just another example of a lot of what could potentially be damaged young men that are escaping war in their areas and fleeing to safer areas. And we're not here. And the United States potentially is causing a lot of, not potentially, let's beat around the bush. Exactly. It is happening.
It's happening.
And then they leave and they come here, and then don't be surprised when they hate you.
Right.
For goodness sakes.
Well, one of the things we were talking about earlier was the incident the other night of Rachel Maddow and MSNBC not playing Donald Trump's acceptance speech. And it's funny to me that they keep saying that Donald Trump is going to be a dictator. He's going to be a dictator. He's going to be a dictator. And what they keep doing is projecting, because I've lost several accounts on social media. I can't say certain things on social media. I'm not the only one. Dictators don't get kicked off social media. Dictators' content doesn't get censored. It's the dictator that does the censoring. So the situation that we're in right now, it's completely understandable. It's new to Americans, but this is an agenda that is being pushed down from the top down. I think it's important. I wanted to read this, and I didn't talk to you about this earlier before we went live, but I think it's important for us to know who our leaders are talking to, Charles. Our leaders, our elected leaders, are going off to Davos and to Europe, and they're talking with world leaders or people that have pronounced themselves as world leaders, unelected. They're making decisions about our life on a daily basis, and our elected officials, right here in Indiana, in fact, are going to those events, taking part of those events, and then coming back, and they're instituting WEF initiatives in the state of Indiana and across the country. It's important to understand who's there. So, for example, when we're looking at what's going on in the video that we're going to play next, everyone that goes there, folks, all these names agree with the WEF agenda and what they're getting ready to do next, and it's wholly unconstitutional. So listen to this. This is from 2023. Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, WEF attendee. United States Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai. Director of Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray. Weird. United States Agency for International Development Administration, Samantha Power. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. Senator Chris Coons. Senator Maria Cantwell. Senator Joe Manchin. Representative Brendan Boyle. Representative Joaquin Castro. Representative Madeline Dean. Representative Daryl Issa. That's one of ours. Representative Gregory Meeks, Representative Seth Moulton, Representative Maria Salazar, Representative, I think it's Mikey Sherrill or something like that. That was in 2023. In addition to that, for those listening in the state of Indiana, that was the year that Eric Holcomb and our state agenda went. So there's a whole WEF agenda set up in the state of Indiana that Eric Holcomb, our current governor, and a lot of the people that we have in the state here, that they support. This last
It's
year,
literally called the IEF, the Indiana Economic Forum. He held a forum here shortly after returning from Davos a couple years ago. I don't remember if it's a yearly forum that they do.
So the reason we're telling you who these people are, it's important that you understand who's going to these events, listening to what they're saying, and then bringing that back home to your home state. And then they're instituting these policies through state policy. And you didn't vote for them. You didn't elect these people in Europe, but that's what's happening right now. Davos is happening right now. And one of the people that is there right now is Penny Pritzker. That name sound familiar? If you're in Illinois, your governor's wife is there. She's there advocating for what we're about to play next, and this is important. Rachel Maddow has already stopped misinformation and disinformation. She did that, she said, by not allowing Trump to speak. This right here is exactly what the WEF has in store for you and me if we allow this to continue.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Klaus, your annual global risk report makes for a stunning and sobering read. For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation, followed closely by polarization within our societies. These risks are serious because they limit our ability to tackle the big global challenges we are facing.
So what she's saying there, Charles, I think it's interesting. Misinformation and disinformation, they're more concerned about that for the next 2 years than they are the climate, than they are diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, all these other issues.
Well, yeah, and they say that misinformation creates conflict. No, it's their misinformation that creates the conflict. The wars, all the conflict through the climate change, it's created through their disinformation. Again, it's another example of projecting. I mean, this is exactly what they're doing. They're telling us what they're doing as they're doing it.
And for the people of the 4th District in particular, because that's who this program is for tonight. I live in Indiana. I know I broadcast to the world, but tonight we're talking to the people of Indiana. That the reason you've got to get in this fight is because our politicians are either going to these events or they're aligning with these events back at home. Jim Baird, who Charles is running against, goes and votes against the Green New Deal, but then institutes all of those policies back in the state of Indiana and brings back projects that are funded by the WEF, supported by the WEF. Now, you can't not vote for it and then go support it because your buddies can make money on the back end of it. That's not how we're supposed to do this, right, Charles?
It's the worst thing that they do. A lot of people always say that they at least the Democrats tell you what they're going to do. The Republicans don't. They'll say one thing and then do another, and that's exactly what you're doing when you're voting. And not one Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act in its final passage. Not one Republican voted for it. But this is also an issue in Iowa, and it's an issue in Nebraska, and it's an issue all over the United States, is the implementation of the WHO and the COP28 now and the WEF's ideas about carbon sequestration and Green New Deal. So they've literally implemented the program under Republican leadership without one Republican vote.
Sick.
And it's clear as day. It's a big issue in Iowa. And in Iowa, they're talking about taking the land in eminent domain and doing carbon sequestration projects. And then at least people say, well, at least in Indiana, the farmers are getting compensated, but that's our money that they're compensating with. And it's through all these subsidies and behind this whole program where all this money is coming to the states. So it's obvious that that's the way it's working. So if you're a Republican that is against the Inflation Reduction Act, then you can't go feed at that trough of money and implement these policies. It's not okay. The worst thing about it for conservatives is it's not about the money as much as it is about this issue that you're selling out on this super important issue, which is, what we see is a scam, and implementing these policies that are horrible just to get access to the money.
Well, that's all it is. It's all about money and power. I don't care what they say. There's nothing that they can tell me that is going to convince me that it's about the environment. Do you know why? Because they're saying, hey, we can put that on hold for 2 years to keep these people quiet.
That's right. That is exactly right. If this was as much as if they said, and that, by the way, I think Biden said last year that this is the greatest threat to humanity is the climate. If that's the case, then you would stop wars immediately, and start focusing on whatever it is we have to do to change this imminent threat of all of us dying.
What's the carbon footprint of a war in Ukraine? What's the carbon footprint of a war in Israel? What's the carbon footprint of a war in the U.S.? What's the It makes no sense,
the carbon
folks.
Footprint of the of Davos this week with all those planes flying out there. So, it's a complete scam.
Again, so the reason what we're talking about tonight is that what they're doing, and most people don't realize it, is that these plans that are being made in Davos are coming back home. How do we know? Because Rachel Maddow censored Trump. And what that was, this message from Davos is, please start silencing people because we don't like what they're saying. Right now, they're using two different words. There's a third one that has come into political speak in the last 3 to 4 months. Misinformation is if you tell something to somebody and you're mistaken. It was wrong information. You had the wrong date, the wrong time, whatever. You didn't mean to, but that's misinformation. Disinformation is where you lie. You're doing it intentionally. Malinformation is the new word. And malinformation, for anybody who's been kicked off of social media, knows exactly what I'm talking about. Malinformation is information that is true, but it hurts the state. It hurts their cause. Charles, your thoughts on that?
I think that's the unfortunate thing is that everything that they're trying to censor are the things that, look, when you say you've been kicked off all these platforms, I don't know what that's like because I've never been on these platforms talking that much openly, but I'm not letting it stop what I'm talking, the positions that I have. So it sounds to me like I might talk about things on these town halls that Facebook or YouTube or something might hit that and say, well, you've been warned, you can't show this content on YouTube anymore. So these are the things that they're trying to censor, calling us disinformationists. Not everyone's right about everything. So you could be accused of misinformation, but malinformation would be the worst. And this reminds me of something, and this is diametrically opposed to what they want. They're attacking it from both angles because they want to shut Trump up. Well, I just said when he goes on live, that should be a good thing because then we can hear what he has to say. Well, if you remember at the Vivek rally, he said he reminded everyone that he does a weekly podcast.
Yep.
And then he said that he intends to continue to do the weekly podcast as president because that's to stay in touch. And he brought up the fireside chats of the Roosevelt administration. And I've been saying the same thing when we talk about these town hall meetings. I've said that this is something that there's no reason that we couldn't continue doing this in Congress once a week. I have a 2-hour town hall meeting and for anyone that wants to jump on, but particularly people in the 4th Congressional District to talk and ask questions and get it live. And this is the kinds of things that they want to actually squelch and curtail. They don't want your participation. They don't want you actively engaged and involved. And let me tell you another reason. And I'm sorry, I want to jump back to the Iowa caucus. I want to jump back to the Iowa caucus. We had, everyone just had a little slip of paper, and they wrote the name of the candidate on that slip of paper, and they handed them in. To get into the room, you had to have an ID, and you had to show your address that you lived in that precinct in Scott County in Davenport, Iowa. And so there were a little over 100 people, whatever that number is. Yeah, that's well over 100, 51 and 44 and 25 and 8 and 1. So you had to check it off, and they had to verify that you're that person living in that precinct to go into that room. And then you would go in there, and you got one slip of paper that was your ballot. And all the papers looked very much the same. They were different colors, though. And everyone just wrote down their name on the ballot. And then they encouraged people to watch the counting. So any of the speakers, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but any of the speakers did I mention this already, Kramer? They could count. Mm-hmm. Okay. They could count it. So I stood there and watched it. And while 5 other people were there counting, and then there were more volunteers that were hanging at the table watching each person count all of these ballots. It took 10 minutes. I know it's only one name, but there was a lot of engagement because people are engaged. Remember how many people we asked there is this your first caucus? And they said, yes, it's our first caucus, because people realize that we've been asleep at the wheel too long. We've been on vacation too long. And now the owners have to start showing up for work again. And so people are doing more and getting more and more engaged. And so they lie to us when they're telling us that we don't need to get involved, or that we don't need to state our opinion. They're lying to us. People want to get engaged. That's what I saw. That's what you saw. People wanting to be there, to mill about, to talk about this, to count ballots, to vote. People wanted to do that. And I think the same thing would happen here, what we're trying to push in Boone County. If we ever got to that, you'd have volunteers coming out of the woodwork. People would come out to help at polls, to help count. They would stay up until 2 a.m. watching everyone to make sure that it happened freely and fairly.
Well, we saw it happen in the recounts. We saw people come forward in the recounts and go, I will be a part of this. I want it to be fair. In fact, what happened in Iowa, Charles, was so transparent, it was blinding.
Yeah. Right? You mean what we saw?
Yeah. It was so transparent. It was blinding. I went, what? It's over? And they go, yep. You came out and you go, this is what they got. This is the count. And we saw it all happen. And I trust it because I watched it happen with my own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That changes the dynamics of how the election happens. I think it's interesting. One of the reasons that they've messed with the election so much, again, let me go back. We talk about the WEF, we talk about the WHO, and people go, oh, yeah, that's all conspiracy theory. I know what you guys are talking about. I've looked into it. Folks, you haven't looked into it. These people are telling you exactly what your future is going to be. They're telling you how you're going to live. In fact, Klaus Schwab wrote a book, and in it he says, you'll own nothing and be happy. Okay? Don't take our word for it that the WEF is putting their tentacles into everything in your life to control everything. They want to be the new world government. They've said so. They're not hiding it. So don't take our word for it. Take Klaus Schwab's word for it when he tells you what the future that they have planned for elections.
The technology now is, and digital technologies mainly have an analytical power. Now we go into a predictive power, and we have seen the first examples, and your company very much involved into it. But then the next step could be to go into a prescriptive mode, which means you do not even have to have elections anymore, because you can already predict, and afterwards you can say, why do we need elections? Because we know what the result will be.
Did you hear that?
Well, they're telling you right there. They're telling you how it is, that they don't want you involved.
Yep. AI
they can just predict it.
AI will do it all. Folks, let me explain something about AI. AI is just a program. It's a fancy program, but it's a computer program, which means it was programmed by humans. It's not flawless. It's not an entity unto itself. It's a computer program, no different than Photoshop or Illustrator or any other program that you use on your computer. It's important to understand that. And they're telling you that they're going to use this tool to tell you who your leaders are. Unelected people telling you what your future is. Charles, why did you run? Is this one of the main reasons that you ran? Tell people why you ran.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just another example. It's this managerial class. And that is just such a huge threat to our time. And it continues to foster the idea that average Americans shouldn't be engaged in politics and the running of our government because we don't have a degree from Harvard. And it's them who are continuing to destroy America from within. And that's why accountability is so important in our form of government. And it's this constant theme throughout all of the AI, climate change, all these things that healthcare, education, we have to sit back and listen to these so-called experts like Rachel Maddow, filter it all through some information, through their filters to give us the right narrative that they want us to understand. And because they know better than we do. And we can't determine this unless it's passed through some kind of filter. So the fact that anyone's watching it in the first place should be telling. They should be reading a book and not watching Rachel Maddow or any of these people on TV. Go read a book.
Exactly.
For goodness
You'll
sake.
be more educated. If you watch
Hey,
these...
by the way, hey, sorry to interrupt, Kramer. Sorry, real quick. Sorry. I before I forget this thought, there was you brought up Klaus Schwab, and a lot of people may not know that name. And you said that this is real. That this is a real organization. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of people behind them. A guy did a podcast. His name's Robert Murphy. He's an economist, and he did I think 3 or 4. If you go look up the Robert Murphy podcast, you can go back and look. It was maybe a year and a half ago. He did a series of them. He read the book, and he studied. This guy's very smart. He's an economist, well-trained economist. He's also an energy economist, by the way. He worked as a consultant to energy companies throughout his tenure, and he talks a lot about Klaus Schwab. So and his family, a lot of the background. So if you're curious about that, I'll encourage you to do that. Sorry to interrupt, Kramer.
Well, I think it's important to understand who the players are here. And for those who haven't educated themselves as to what the WEF is and what their plan is, it's important to listen to them over and over and over again. They keep telling you exactly what they're going to do. I've said time and time again, they have a plan. They've written a book about it. They've told you exactly what they're going to do. When rich people tell me that they want me dead, I believe them. I take them at their word. When they say that there's too many of us and they start putting forth plans that looks like they're trying to limit us, I know it sounds conspiratorial. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm listening to them, Charles. That's what they're telling us. They're saying it. They're not hiding it. They've said it time and time again.
Yeah, and they've been saying it for a long time. I mean, eugenics programs were rampant in the United States. I mean, the United States has many examples of progressive liberals trying to implement eugenics programs, and they say it exactly what they're doing. They say it is to create a race that they want to create based on these specific genetics. I mean, these people, it's been going on for 150 years. If you don't know that, then you need to just look it up.
We've heard the term before. We heard it from that little dude over in Germany back in the 1940s. They wanted to create the super race. They have not stopped trying. They're still doing the exact same thing. The exact same group of people with the same ideology. They've ganged up together and they've got this globalist agenda to take over the planet. I know it sounds crazy, but they're saying it. They're telling you what it is. Yuval Harari, who's one of Klaus Schwab's right-hand man, is very clear. And we all know this. They don't want Trump to be president again because he's the biggest threat to the global agenda. They say it over and over and over again. And more particularly, Yuval Harari, who is Klaus Schwab's right-hand man, he's one of his #1 advisors, this is what he had to say when asked this question.
Are you concerned that Trump might be elected again shortly?
I think it's very likely. And if it happens, it is likely to be the kind of like the death blow to what remains of the global order. And he says it openly. Now, again, it should be clear that many of these politicians they present a false dichotomy, a false binary vision of the world, as if you have to choose between patriotism and globalism.
So we have to make a choice. They're telling us there's a choice now between like we have to make a choice. Well, they think they have to make a choice between this. No, I choose being a patriot of the United States of America, Charles. How about you?
I do. He's projecting. He's projecting
again. And listen how he just throws it off what the plan is. Listen what he says here at the end.
Between being loyal to your nation and being loyal to some kind of, I don't know, global government or whatever.
Or whatever we have planned for you. They're telling you what they're going to do, people. When we tell you this is what they're doing, they can't do it all at one time. It takes 30, 40, 50 years for some of these plans to happen. And when they're building 15-minute cities in your backyard or doing projects like the LEAP project in Boone County, just north of Lebanon, they're telling you what they're going to do. And if you're saying, well, I'll take your money as you build something, they're building the cage they're going to put you in. Am I right?
I agree. Absolutely. And think about something I just noticed when he said that. Think about that narrative shift. I think it's shifting the Overton window is what they say. When he said that they shift the decision-making from being patriotic or whatever to your nation to that of globally. But in reality, the shift is further over than that. It's really a dedication to your family and your church and your community before your nation even. But he shifted that over until really what he's pointing out is we really have lost focus of the smaller entity. I don't think God ever wanted us to be a central entity. It was always spread out and decentralized. And it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous coming from a man that the only way I can sum up that dude, Harari, is that he's so man-focused. He thinks that mankind is the center of everything and the answer to everything, that if just with enough time, man will figure it out. And I think he's way off and wrong. That's why I can't trust anything. I think he's way off about AI and the development between humans and technology. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, because
if you listen,
sorry, if you listen to what he says, sorry to interrupt, but if you listen to what he says, some of his other pieces, that he wants to integrate men with computers, and that the men's soul would be able to be captured in digital AI and be able to be harnessed. The power, the way he talks is insane. No different than Klaus Schwab. And these are the people that our elected officials are listening to.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say he doesn't believe in God, because he does. It's just God is him.
Right. Well, that's what he says. He says, we are God. We are God.
That's right. And I'm pretty sure that he thinks it's him specifically, but
most likely. Well, Charles, one of the things that's interesting, and I think about your run, is that you, like me, up until 2020, we had great jobs. We were running, great businesses, and then a group of people came along and said, "No, you're not going to do that. You can't do what you've always been able to do. You can't do that. You can't speak truth to power. You can't speak truth to anybody if it hurts us or it harms us." And so they started censoring us. They shut down our businesses. They told us to wear masks. You got to take this. You got to do that to be free. That's why I got involved, because I said I'm not going to live as a slave. Tell your story as to why you got involved, and that's how we'll close out tonight.
Well, I'm not. A lot of people have heard my story. All I'm going to say is,
well, let me come back. This is a new audience. You've got 130,000 people you're listening
I will.
to.
But what you're describing, I want to bring up a point, is that who you're describing. I'm humble in what I'm saying. This is what Eric Weinstein was talking about when he was talking about the Dream Team. The Dream Team is not just Dr. Malone, and it's not just all the. They're slipping my mind some of the doctors that came out, and some of the other scientists and people who, from the very beginning, have disagreed with the narrative. That's who Weinstein said, you took all these people, you took away their opinion, you took away their jobs, and they're together now speaking truth, and it's the Dream Team. Well, the Dream Team includes Tim Kramer, and the Dream Team includes Charles Bookwalter, and it includes a few of these other people that we meet that gave up their lives, gave up their livelihoods, and have decided to fight back, if you will, which is exactly what I did. My professional career was after getting out of the Army, I was a medic in the Special Forces, and I knew that job would allow me to get back into sales that I did before I went in the Army. And I got into medical device sales, working for Intuitive Surgical, who's a manufacturer of the Da Vinci robot. It was an awesome job, very rewarding, working in the OR every day, working with surgeons on how to use the Da Vinci robot and talk about the benefits of surgery and being in surgery all the time. It was a real fun experience, very rewarding. But when my life was turned upside down, like many of you, many people out there have the same stories, that you had to find something else to do. You had to find another job because you didn't want to get jabbed, or you had to go put all your effort into your small business because of the overreaction, and it completely turned your life upside down. And, it made us realize something that we forgot as Americans, and that we are never supposed to place our trust in these institutions in the first place. The reason they were set up to be very limited in scope and for us to be highly involved in this process is because they can't be trusted. That's a fact. And we forgot that as Americans because we came so far off of that original philosophy, that original idea. We made it so far, but we've turned on those ways and we've turned on those ideas, and we've got to get back to it. So I humbly like to include myself in part of that team that's across America. There's a lot of candidates running for Congress. There's business owners. There's everybody that's not going to take it anymore, that we're pushing back. And we're not just going to forget about it and say we're never going to let that happen again. Right. No, we are going to hold you accountable. And because if anything, what you're seeing is they're doubling down. When you show those clips, they are doubling down on their effort to suppress this, to create a narrative, and enforce our compliance with what they're trying to do with their managerial class system that they're trying to set up the way they want it to be done with your money. And nothing is different in time. This has been the story of civilization from the beginning of time. It's just a cycle that we keep seeing, and this is no different, and we've got to do something about it, and we are, and so many of us are waking up and fighting back. And so thank you very much for doing that. And you can do it by going to our website, bookwalterforcongress.com, signing up to stay informed and sharing this with 10 of your friends. It's your job. If you're not going to engage in any other way, is to share this information, tell 10 of your friends, so that you can support this movement that's going on. We need time, talent, and treasure. And so if you're interested in helping the campaign, support us financially or through any ideas or anything that you could potentially help out the campaign with, please contact us. We're looking for positions and volunteers.
Well, and Charles, I'm going to jump in real quick because we're on a national audience, right? This is not just going to the 4th District of Indiana. We're not broadcasting on a radio station. This is to the entire planet. And this is what I'll say. This is my call. For those followers of mine that are watching my content and the channels that we're streaming on tonight, this is the kind of warrior you've been looking for. Stand up. Support them. It's time that you start putting your money where your mouth is. People keep saying nothing's ever going to happen. We drove into a blizzard to go caucus for Trump because somebody said we need help in Iowa. That's standing up. That's not me patting myself on the back. That's what it takes to get the job done. And if you can't be there and you can't do it, we understand that. We've got that. But we need the support. So if you like what Charles is saying and you're looking for somebody who's going to stand up, by the way, I'm in his ear all day long. So for those of you who know my content, this is a fighter. This is what we've been looking for. These are the men and women we've got to support. We cannot go and support the incumbents. They've already proven time and time again they can't be trusted with the power that we've given them. They will utilize it against us. They will rob us of our tax dollars. They will call us the criminals if we say we don't want to be taught this, we don't want to be taught that to our children. It's time that we stop it, and the way that you do it is you term limit these incumbents by voting them out and by supporting the grassroots. That's where you put your money. The DNC and the RNC, they got enough money. They don't need your money. Send it to the incumbents, or send it to the grassroots, and let's get these incumbents out. Let's get some fresh blood in there. Charles, do you have anything else to wrap up with?
No, thank you very much. Every Thursday night, join the virtual town hall. Tell 10 of your friends. Ask questions. This is how our system is supposed to work. full engagement, full involvement. And we need to hear your opinion if we're running for office and we're going up there to represent you. So get engaged and contact my campaign about information regarding precinct committeeman and state delegate. And Kramer, thanks a lot for your time. Please join me again next Thursday night for the next virtual town hall.
We'll be there. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
I'm pretty loyal to Trump, so I mean, I'll go through a blizzard like yesterday to go vote.
When President Trump's team said they needed help in Iowa due to the blizzard, only one Indiana congressional campaign stepped up.
It's getting a little squirrely.
Endorsing President Trump because it looks good in a press release, well, that's one thing. But showing up when President Trump asks for your help, that is something completely different.
My name is Charles Bookwalter. I'm a former Green Beret, and I'm a candidate for Congress in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. We drove over here during this bad weather and this blizzard to help out, right? And we're here to help out because it seems like in Iowa, like in Indiana, that this is a race for second place, that our leader has already been chosen. This is the man that is going to help fight against the most pressing issue we have, which is the managerial class and holding them accountable. These issues, these crises that we face right now, the border, energy, inflation, forever wars, this is brought on by a managerial class that is failing us, and they tell us that we need to just go home. They got it all under control. Everything's taken care of as they give away our country. And frankly, it's a disgrace, and everyone in here should be offended. And we have some good candidates out there, but the fact is that this is the man that's going to lead us. This is the man that's going to unite us, and this is the man that we all need to get. You want to see Republicans unite and come together? Then this is how we do it. The Department of Justice, another part of the managerial class, has been weaponized against this man. And so by defending Donald J. Trump, we're saving our own skin. Does anyone else feel that way? Does anyone else feel that way? By protecting this man, we're protecting our own skin. But right now, we need to rally behind this man, and we need to take our country back. And the last thing I'll say is what Green Berets do all over the country. We recruit, train, and fight alongside our allies in other parts of the world. That's what you need to do. You need to get involved. You need to get engaged. You need to run for precinct committeeman. You need to run for delegate. And you need to take our country back.
To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and the Bookwalter for Congress campaign, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com.